Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. I'm really excited for today's topic. We're going to explore the life and work of an artist you might not know, Bob Camblin. But, and I'm saying this to you, the listener, trust me on this one, even if that name doesn't ring a bell immediately, stick with us. Camblin's story and how he saw art, how he saw the world, it's honestly pretty fascinating.
It's true. You don't always hear his name in the big, mainstream art conversations, but he's highly respected, especially by other artists, and his work, well, it's something else. And the materials we have for this deep dive are, they're incredible.
Yeah, we've really got a great spread of sources here. Let's see, we have this Quotes and Other Mysteries, which is straight from Camblin himself, his own words. Then there's, of course, the biography, a pretty in-depth one.
We also have a YouTube video, and this one really digs into a specific painting of his called Old Paint.
Oh, right, and don't forget those excerpts from some critical analyses and reflections on his art, right? Like
Yeah.
from Zen and the Art of Enlightenment and Bob Camblin and Complete Works.
And even some firsthand accounts from people who actually knew him, which is,
All right.
really special. Like, what was he really like? You get that personal side, all that's in historical info.
So that's the raw material.
It's a lot.
That's a lot, I know. But our goal, our mission for this deep dive is to put all these pieces together like a puzzle. We want to figure out what made this guy tick. What were his big ideas about art, about creativity, about seeing the world? And, ultimately, what can we take away from all this?
That's it. Like, how does his view, his perspective resonate with you? The listener, I mean. That's what we're after.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, right? The foundation. Bob Camblin was born, let me check my notes, 1928 in Oklahoma.
And what's interesting is, from what we know, he was this sort of enigmatic figure, really respected among his peers, but never like a household name, sort of flew under the radar in a way.
Right. And his art, highly sought after, but you don't see it around much.
Now, he did have a very strong background in art, no question. He studied at the Kansas City Art Institute, and get this, he even got a Fulbright scholarship to go study in Italy.
That's huge.
Right, Italy. Talk about a place steeped in art history.
Yeah.
So that's a formative experience right there. And what's interesting is that after Italy, he actually spent a good chunk of his career in academia.
Oh, that's right. He taught at a bunch of universities, including Rice University in Houston.
Yeah, so, it seems like he was on a pretty, I don't know, like a pretty standard, I guess, art career path.
Yeah.
Study, teach.
And this is where things get interesting, right? In 1976, he just decides, nope, I'm done with that. He leaves the academic world.
Just like that. Leave it behind to become, get this, a nomadic artist. Starts traveling all over the place.
Wow. To me, that says so much about his dedication. He needed to experience the world firsthand to fuel his art.
It's like he felt confined by the whole academic structure. Needed to break free.
Absolutely. And his art, well, it wasn't just one style either. The guy worked with everything. Oils, acrylics, watercolors, drawings, prints, even painted paper. He wasn't afraid to experiment.
Right. His style evolved over time, starting with abstract impressionism, then shifting into this, it's a mouthful, mouches volantes style.
Which basically, for those who are wondering, means flying flies in French, right? And it often uses these little scattered elements, like the little floaters you might see in your vision.
Yeah, exactly. And later on, he even started incorporating drawings and watercolors into the mix. But another interesting thing about Camblin is his collaborative nature. He often, get this, signed his works anonymously.
That's so strange, right? It makes you think, why would he do that?
It's like he's downplaying his own ego, right? Putting the art itself first and foremost, like who made it, was secondary.
Right, or maybe it was a statement about, the collective nature of art, or who knows? It definitely makes you curious.
It really does. Okay, so let's dive into the sources we have, because they really give us a more complete picture. Like you mentioned, the biography, that gives us this, chronological look at his life. And it starts in Ponca City, Oklahoma, where he was born.
Yeah, and the biography even talks about some of the early influences around him there, right? I remember reading about the Marland Estate, which was this massive mansion, really opulent, and then the Pioneer Woman statue.
I remember that too, the statue. It was so iconic. So you wonder if being surrounded by these things, these images, as a kid, if that planted some seeds in a way.
Absolutely. And the biography goes on to talk about his education, of course, and then his teaching years, and then that pivotal decision to ditch it all and become a nomadic artist.
Right, that's a big turning point. And it also, dives into his collaborative projects, like how that Mouches Volante style developed.
It's a good starting point to get a sense of the timeline of his life. And then there's Bob Camblin quotes and other mysteries. That one's amazing because it's his actual voice. Like, we get to hear his thoughts, his ideas directly from him.
Straight from the source. And his language is like, it's almost poetic. He's not just writing dry statements. There's this real depth to his words.
Absolutely. And then we have that YouTube video, Old Paint, and this one's really visual. It takes us into one specific painting and analyzes it. And what's cool is they connect the painting to these Eastern philosophies like Zen, the I Ching, and even the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, those connections are really eye-opening. And they talk a lot about themes like, impermanence, creativity, and the power of memory. Like, how do those things all play into this work?
Right. And then we have these like deeper interpretations in the pasted text source, which pulls from Zen and the Art of Enlightenment and Bob Camblin in Complete Works.
Those are like the more academic perspectives. They really unpack old paint. But they also provide some background on Camblin's influences, like Ralph Waldo Emerson and the whole idea of haiku.
Right. And important phases in his life, like his time in Italy and the whole move to Houston.
Yeah, and the pasted text also delves into some of his artistic principles. It even talks about how he used these traps, right? These like deliberate ambiguities or hidden elements in his art to kind of challenge the viewer's perception.
Like little visual riddles almost. And then lastly, we have historical info, which includes some interesting book reviews and, this is the gold, personal quotes from people who knew him. Like, we get to hear from Earl Staley, who was a close friend, and I believe they shared studio space in Houston at one point.
Yeah, so it's like we get these glimpses into the real guy, not just the artist, and that really rounds out the picture.
So we've got all this great material, and like we said, our deep dive mission, what we're trying to do here is bring it all together. Understand what was at the heart of Camblin's ideas about art, about creativity, how we see the world, and the whole human experience. And we want to share that with you, the listener.
Basically, to give you a peek into this very intricate, very interesting mind.
Exactly. Okay, so let's dive into some of the big themes that pop up when we look at Camblin's quotes, his own words. And one that jumped out at me right away was his take on time and how fleeting everything is.
That makes sense. Time is a big one for artists, right?
He wrote, "Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years, perhaps." It's just, I don't know, so much packed into that one sentence, right? That sense of like, yeah, nothing really lasts.
And there's this other quote from him. It's from Salt Air, summer 1967, and it's about how the memory of music faded. Like, things start to decay, and he realizes everyone's aging right then in that moment.
Right, like this collective experience of time passing.
And you see this awareness, the sensitivity to time, to how things are always changing. I think you see it throughout his work.
For sure. And another fascinating thing is how he views understanding. Like, what does it mean to understand something? And he says, look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both. It's like he's not drawing lines between those things.
Yeah, there's this quote where he talks about wanting like a bright gray where it's not just black or white. He wants this blend of like science and magic. Like, they're both valid ways of knowing.
Right, right. He's not limiting himself to one way of seeing things. And he talks about the sixth sense, like intuition, being without a doubt.
But at the same time, he also writes about how doubt, uncertainty, it's part of the human experience. It's this interesting tension.
Absolutely. Like, we want to be certain, but life is just, well, it's not like that.
And how do you deal with that, right? The listener. I mean, how do you navigate that?
That's the question. Okay, let's move on to, I think this is really beautiful, his connection to nature.
Oh, yeah. Nature was huge for him.
He wrote, find something in nature that completes you and then surrender.
It's such a powerful idea, right?
Yeah.
Like finding that connection and then just letting go.
And he talks about seeing the universe, like the entire cosmos, reflected in tree leaves, in sunlight. I mean,
Wow.
that's deep. It's like he sees this like interconnectedness between everything. And that idea of surrender, it's very much in line with Eastern philosophy.
For sure. And speaking of which, his view on the purpose of art, how he saw the role of art, it's interesting. He writes, art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake. It's like it's more than just pretty pictures.
It's functional, right? Like it has to serve a purpose.
Yeah, it's connected to how we live, how we see ourselves, even our survival.
And later on, he talks about art as a participatory experience. Like
Yeah.
it's not just about the artist or the viewer alone. It's this like Shared thing. Totally. Okay, and then
Mhm.
he's got these little nuggets of wisdom that are almost like Zen koans, those little mind-bending sayings like, step off the train of thought. What does that even mean?
It's like he's saying, stop overthinking,
Yeah, okay.
get out of your head.
Right, right. And then there's this one, when you think, don't act. When you act, don't think.
That's like, whoa, wait a minute. What's he saying there?
I think it's about being fully present in whatever you're doing. Like when you're thinking, really think. When you're acting, just act. Don't get all tangled up in your thoughts.
Like, be in the moment fully.
Exactly. And, he was very comfortable with paradox, with things that don't seem to make sense on the surface. He wrote, balancing and being for and against, and that the balance will be found in our minds.
Like, he embraced contradiction. And that's actually a big part of many philosophies and spiritual traditions, right? Like, the truth isn't always one side or the other.
Totally. And even the way he talks about communication, it's so insightful. He says, if you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate. I had to read that one a few times.
It's like he's saying real communication. It's deeper than just words,
Yeah.
deeper than just agreeing or disagreeing. It's about like really understanding each other.
Maybe on a different level, yeah.
Maybe. And then there's this really interesting quote about creativity and destruction. He says, cynicism is a type of creativity gone destructive and ego-oriented. I never thought about it that way.
Me neither. It's like cynicism is still creative, but it's turned inward, become negative.
Right. It's like a misuse of that creative energy.
Exactly. And lastly, let's talk about his view on the role of the artist. He calls the artist a free agent and talks about this ecology of art where every artist is part of a bigger picture.
Like a natural system, right?
Uh,
Everything has its role to play.
Yeah, and the free agent thing, that connects to his whole nomadic period. Like, he didn't want to be tied down. He needed that freedom.
So that's Camblin's own voice, his thoughts. Now let's see how that connects to what we know about his life. Like we said, he grew up with both parents being artists.
That's got to have a huge impact, right? From day one, he's surrounded by art.
Absolutely. Like, it's not just something you do, it's who you are.
Totally. And the biography talks about how much he loved to read. Like, he was a voracious reader. He devoured Emerson, the I Ching, haiku.
And you can see those influences in his writing, right?
Yeah,
Like, the way he expresses himself is so concise, almost like haiku.
for sure. It's that ability to capture a lot of meaning in just a few words.
Right, like he's not wasting any words.
Totally.
Right.
And his time in Italy, that's a big one. The biography talks about how he was really impacted by the Uffizi Gallery, all those Renaissance masterpieces, but also by the Capuchin catacombs.
That's a strange combination, right? Like, beautiful art and, well, death.
I know. And the biography says that both of those places, those images, they stuck with him. They influenced his art.
It's like this weird mix of beauty and mortality.
Right.
Like the extremes of human experience.
Totally. And then there's the move to Houston. He felt like it was a much more receptive environment for his art compared to Salt Lake City.
The art scene there it was just different,
Yeah.
more welcoming.
Yeah. And they embraced his work, which is what any artist wants, right? To be seen, to be appreciated.
Absolutely. And the biography talks about his, I don't know, his sort of love-hate relationship with the whole art game, as he calls it. Like, he was wary of the business side of art.
Right. He wanted to keep it pure in a way, to focus on the art itself, not the money or the fame.
And that explains, I think, his nomadic period and why he sometimes wouldn't sign his work.
Yeah.
He wanted to stay true to himself.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about those collaborative projects like B&E Productions, which he did with Earl Staley and Joe Tate, and later, the holding firm.
He was all about collaboration, like
Yeah.
bouncing ideas off other artists.
And their work together, it explored these themes of metamorphosis, scarecrows, hidden meanings, like stuff that's not immediately obvious.
Right. It's like they're inviting you to dig deeper, to think
Yeah.
about what it all means. And that, I think, is a big part of Camblin's appeal.
For sure. Okay, let's zoom in on one specific painting, Old Paint, because we have a lot to unpack here. The YouTube video and the pasted text give us some really interesting interpretations.
Yeah, and just visually it's striking. Like, it's got these translucent layers, faded colors, almost ghostly figures inside these like bell shapes. And then there's this big paint tube right in the middle.
It's definitely about memory, right, and the process of making art.
And there's so many ways to interpret it. Like, some people see it as like time folding in on itself,
Yeah.
past, present, all mixed up.
Right, right. And the figures, they're like these half-remembered images, maybe from the past. And there's this tension between wanting to hold on to things and knowing that everything fades.
And that paint tube, it's like this symbol of creativity,
Huh.
of the power to, like, reinterpret the past, to make something new.
Totally. And the YouTube video, it connects the painting to Zen Buddhism.
Which makes sense, right? Like, Zen is all about impermanence, accepting that nothing lasts.
Exactly. And they say the figures, the faded colors, it's all pointing to that constant state of change. And the paint tube, it represents creativity as a way to be mindful, to be present.
Like, when you're creating, you're focused on that moment, on the act itself.
Right. And they also connect the painting to the I Ching, specifically hexagram 18, which is all about like working with things that have decayed, trying to fix them, to give them new meaning.
It's like the artist is like a restorer, in a way, taking something old and making it new again.
And lastly, they bring in the Tao Te Ching with its emphasis on fluidity and change. And the painting, visually, it really embodies that.
The figures are like dissolving, the colors are blending. It's all very fluid, very dynamic.
So you put it all together, and old paint, it's like this meditation on aging, on how our identities change, how our memories fade.
But it's also about hope,
Right.
about how we can keep reinventing ourselves, how we can find new meaning.
Absolutely. And the paint tube, it's that symbol of creativity, of that potential.
So one painting,
Yeah.
so many layers of meaning.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how critics and people who knew Camblin saw his work. The book review for The Art of Everything, it really focuses on the paradoxes, the illusions, those traps we talked about.
Yeah, and the review says that Camblin wasn't necessarily trying to give you answers. He wanted to make you think, to ask questions.
Like he wanted to provoke you, make you look deeper. And the foreword to Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, Volume 1, it connects his work to all these different philosophical and artistic traditions.
Right, like he was drawing from all these different sources, Zen, the I Ching,
Yeah.
and it made his art more than just, like, visually appealing.
It's like his art was a way to become more aware, to question your own assumptions.
And that same review, it calls his art koans, which are those, like, riddles in Zen Buddhism that don't have logical answers.
Right. It's about breaking out of that linear way of thinking.
Yeah.
And they talk about everyday enlightenment, finding beauty in the absurd and accepting that everything changes.
That's a great way to sum up his whole philosophy, actually.
Totally. Okay. And now for the good stuff. The personal stories, the insights from people who knew him. Pete Gershon, he describes Camblin as a mystical trickster figure.
Which is so perfect, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was wise, but also playful, always messing with you a little bit.
And George O. Jackson Jr., he talks about reading Camblin's art like a book, finding all these references to the world around us.
Right, like there's so much meaning embedded in the details. And he emphasizes how dedicated Camblin was to his art. Like, it was his whole life.
Absolutely. And Earl Staley, his friend and collaborator, he has some really touching stories about working with Camblin, learning from him.
And how Camblin eventually left Houston, but his impact, it stayed with Staley.
It's those personal connections that really bring the story to life.
And Penny Serling, she remembers Camblin as someone who questioned everything. Like, he was never satisfied with simple answers, and he was all about collaboration.
Always pushing the boundaries, always curious. And Carolyn Farb, she talks about Camblin's pure joy in creating. Like, he loved what he did.
It's a good reminder that even with all the, the intellectual stuff, it's still about that simple joy of making art.
Totally. Okay, so wrapping it all up, Bob Camblin, he was an artist who was deeply interested in the big questions about time, about how we perceive the world, about what's real. And his art, it was always inviting you to go deeper, to question your assumptions.
And he wasn't afraid to play with your mind a little, right? To challenge you.
Totally. And whether it's through his own words, his paintings like old paint, or the stories from people who knew him, Camblin's whole approach to art, it's about being mindful, about questioning, about always looking for more.
And he never stopped evolving, He was always experimenting, always pushing himself.
So, to our listener, think about that quote we talked about. Step off the train of thought. What train of thought are you on right now? What would happen if you stepped off? What might you see differently? That's something to think about, something to explore.
That's a good question.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us.